Hi everyone, welcome back to the final running costume of this year. So for the half marathon of Disneyland Paris, I went as the Sleeping Beauty Castle. And before I start this video, I do want to say that I'm aware that this was basically on the edge of the costume rules. While I managed to survive in this costume and I had a lot of fun running in this, I won't be making such a big thing to run in for the next time, also to prevent breaking the costume guidelines. In this video, I'll be basically showing you how I made this and how I felt about it. I don't have a lot of video footage because filming was a little hard to do, but I'll show you a lot of pictures and a lot of time lapses from when I was creating this. I know I could have made it easier for myself to make this for the 10K instead, or just not wear it at all, but because I put in so much time and effort in this costume, I really wanted to spend the longest race in this costume. Again, as I'm more of a crafter than a runner, I did love spending time on this costume even though it was a lot of tedious work. So let's get started. As usual, I started off with making a sketch and a general to-do list. Running as a castle was a crazy idea at first, but my first sketch does originate from January this year. So one of my favorite part of creating this costume was to simply paste a picture on top of my body so I could get a clear sight what to make and how it was supposed to look like. I also made sure that it was also on scale. This is why kinda unfortunately the castle turned out huge, which was inconvenient while running. Because there are so many steps and details, I made sure to write down as many steps as possible. For this project I needed cardboard, a lot of cardboard. Using the digital version, I measured all the pieces and cut them out. Because this was physically such a big project, I was afraid I wouldn't be able to execute it, as I basically had to make the entire thing from cardboard. Luckily, after some cutting, the shape of the castle became visible. To create this layered 3D effect, I cut out strips of cardboard pieces that became crosses. It was an easy way to lift up the towers without adding too much weight. As I mainly used hot glue, I always made sure to put the crosses and towers in the right spot. After the shape was formed, I simply cleaned up the borders by cutting the cardboard away. So while my first idea was to create the front only, I found a running costume tip that said that most of the people that will see you and your costume will be behind you, so make sure the back is pretty and interesting as well. So I repeated the same steps to create the back of the castle. After I was done with the structure of both sides of the castle, I covered it entirely with paper mache. It was a big wet mess, but very much needed to create the sturdiness of the entire castle, and of course, it makes it easier to paint. Like Maleficent from last year, I attached the whole structure using wire. The front would be hanging like a necklace, while the back would be worn like a backpack. As it was very unclear what I did last year, I had a close-up ready for this one. Using something sharp like a screwdriver, I made holes and used the wire to sew it through the cardboard. I did break dried paper mache so I could reach both sides, and did this several times in case parts of the cardboard would break. After I ran out of wire, I would cover the exposed parts with duct tape to keep it in place. After cutting away unnecessary parts of the cardboard, it was time to prime it. As I would use lots of cheap paints, it was important that the castle had a white base for colors to appear brighter. 2.5 weeks before the race, I could finally paint it. Creating accurate colors has always been a struggle for me, but I did come close, and luckily it was obvious what I was trying to do. The main colors that I used were blue, pink, brown and grey, yellow, and occasionally I would need something else. To make straight lines and stripes, I just used painter's tape, which helped a lot, especially for very long lines or parts that were not flat enough for a ruler. I took my time to create as many details as possible to make it accurate. Like last year, acrylic paint markers gives the structure so much more detail and were fantastic to use. And as a final detail, I used sticks and tape to create the golden flags that are on top of almost each tower. And finally, to make wearing the castle more comfortable, I used aluminum foil and duct tape to wrap around the wire where it would touch my skin. So while working on the castle, I was not in the mood to do the head as well, but it was simply a must-do, so I created the base using cardboard and hot glue. I covered the structure with thread and duct tape to create a round shape and continued the process like the castle was done. I put on paper mache, I primed it and painted it blue. I added details when I wasn't working on the castle. As you can see, there was also a color piece that I made for the costume, but I couldn't really find a way to attach it, so I left it out. I would have preferred it if I made it like Rosie's color from last year's 5K. Anyways, to get the pointy hat to stay on my head, I hot glued a hairband onto the bottom and used duct tape and wire to keep the balance of the hat. Both the hat and the shirt were kind of lazy pieces, so I kind of rushed through them to get them done as fast as possible. I braided white fabric strips to create the details on the taller tower and sewed them onto pink fabric which used to be a scarf. I ran out of white fabric, so I used elastics on the back, which didn't really matter as the back of the castle covered almost my entire back. The shirt itself is a running shirt and I also wore running pants, so that was comfortable at least. And that's the full costume. As you can see, the sides are open, thus it wasn't really a 360 degrees costume, which are not allowed. But you can see it's a little shaky and a little wobbly, and it would have been more appropriate as a cosplay or convention basically. But I did like the total look. I was very lucky to be traveling with the car this year, so I didn't really have to move this into trains and buses or anything, which was very nice. So on Sunday morning, the race day itself, it started raining. It wasn't a lot of rain, but you could definitely get wet from it. I didn't really think of this and didn't bring any protection, so my costume did have to soak up a little bit of water. This did kind of weaken some towers a little bit, which I'll show you later. Secondly, I don't train in my costumes, and I know that is kind of a recipe for disaster. And I was definitely prepared for a few mishaps during the race. So once I started running, the front would be slamming against my knees, which I did expect. So I did have to hold the front the entire time of the race. Also, because this costume was consisting of two big flat cardboard pieces, there was a lot of wind resistance, especially in the open fields in between the villages, in the surroundings. I really had to hold my costume so I wouldn't get blown away. Something I'll show you later is how my hat fell off around the 10-kilometer mark. The wire that would hold up my head got loose, and that resulted into the hat not staying on my head. Luckily I managed to fix it after 1 kilometer, but it was still a struggle to get it working, and I almost just wanted to throw it away, to not deal with it anymore. So one problem that did happen was that I accidentally hit someone, and I really felt guilty about it. Not only when it happened, but also during the entire race, also after the race had happened, and also a few weeks later. Luckily, a few weeks ago, I found a way to contact her, and I did apologize personally. I felt very sorry for what I did. I've learned my lesson, and as I said in the beginning, this is the last time I will be making something physically so big, because I also don't want to break the costume guidelines, but I also don't want to injure myself or other people. Those were the negative points, and I know it was kind of a lot, but of course I also had a lot of great moments. Because my costume was so big and hard to miss, the crowd and the cast members just went wild. I basically heard the word castle in so many different languages, and because I was struggling so much in this race, every time people would yell at me or encourage me, it really kept me going forward. So while this costume could have been better for the 10K, it was nice to also show the people outside of Disneyland Paris how crazy those Run Disney races can get. So I unfortunately started in the last choral, so by the time I got to any character, there was already a huge line, so I skipped many character meets. But the thing is, I became my own photo opportunity. I did have to stop several times to take a picture with someone, but I didn't mind it at all. I was very happy that my costume made other people happy. And of course, I made this costume because it was my idea, my passion. It was also very nice and very rewarding that other people also appreciated it. This costume was basically my love letter to Disneyland Paris, and especially in the last few years, Disneyland Paris has been very important to me. My costumes from last year were also very dedicated to the entertainment in Disneyland Paris, so this year running as a castle was kind of like the top, the maximum I could go. Also, I hope to keep this theme going for the next coming races and years. So after a few months of the castle standing here, I also want to show you how damaged the castle got during the race, which honestly wasn't that much, but I do have a few points to mention. So because the back was rubbing against my back, as you can see, on some places the paint rubbed away, but these are spots that people wouldn't have seen anyways. As I mentioned, I have a few weak towers, and they were already kind of weak during making the costume, and especially with the rain, it only got worse, but I wasn't surprised that they couldn't really hold up anymore. This is also a piece that fell off around the 8 kilometers mark, I think, also because it just was never strong enough and because of the rain. I did attach some elastics to reduce the whole flapping around thing, but because of the tension it also just snapped off at some point. And I've shown you how I made basically the attachments, and yeah, this was basically hanging around my neck like this while I wore the bag as a backpack. And yeah, because all the weight was basically around my shoulders, I did have a little muscle pain at the end, but it was definitely worth it. And this was the hat that I made. As you can see, duct tape and hot glue basically kept the hat together. Because of the rain, you can't really see it, but also paint has chipped off. What I was talking about earlier was basically that this wire part came loose, and I really needed this part to keep this headband on top of my head. I stuck the bib on the castle using very strong double-sided tape. On this side it's getting loose again. Yeah, but I'm not sure if I can safely take it off without damaging the castle or the bib. Currently I'm not really sure what I'm going to do with the castle. If I want to wear it again, or rather cut up the wires, stick the two sides to each other and basically finish it nice and neatly as a decoration piece. I do quite like it, having it just in my room. It's a nice piece of decoration already. Over here I have the medals, the half marathon medal and the 36K medal. If they did this 1 year earlier, I would have been very happy, so I could have worn my dragon hat. And I do have the 31K and the C2C medals as well, but they're currently not in the place where I'm now. This is a picture of me directly after I finished, and as you can see there, the tower did bend, and I am surprised that the castle majorly survived, even though I was a big mess. And one final thing, Run Disney did feature me on their Run Disney Instagram account, which makes me very happy. And that's everything I've got to say about making the castle for a half marathon. And if I'm not posting any videos anymore this year, I wish you all happy holidays and a happy new year.